Welcome, everyone, to our Debating Development Podcast, Episode 3. We have a packed show for you today with two very special guests. My name is Olga Brodescu-Kavanagh, and I will be your host for today. We have Ms. Gretta Fitzgerald, our guest, who is the Head of International Advocacy at Concern Worldwide, where she leads efforts to influence development and humanitarian policy. She holds a PhD in Rural Development and Food Security from the University College Cork and brings more than 12 years of experience in the NGO and academic sectors. 10 of those are with Concern Worldwide. Her career has included leadership roles in complex development and humanitarian programs, working alongside local partners, governments, academia, and donors in some of the world's most challenging contexts. She has spent time in many of the countries where Concern works, with much of her experience based in Bangladesh, Sudan, and Chad. Today, Gretta continues to champion strong global action on hunger, poverty, and resilience through her leadership in international advocacy. We also have Adam Mullins in the studio with us, who is an environmental activist and also an astrophysics student, and the founder of the Student Pantry initiative, a student-led solution to food waste and insecurity based in the University of Galway, where he redistributes thousands of kilograms of surplus food items to students. Welcome to the studio, Adam, and Gretta, welcome to our Zoom call. And thank you for kindly making the time to answer some of our questions connected to motion number 3 for the debating students from 2025-2026. And the motion is Global Commitments to Ending World Hunger Are a Load of Hot Air. To begin our conversations today, I'd like to share one striking fact. Around the year 2000, the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization estimated roughly 900 million people were undernourished worldwide. That figure fell to about 585 million by 2014, which was a real progress, but has risen sharply due to conflict ever since. Climate change, economic crises, and today, around 733 million people lack enough food to meet their daily needs. A staggering reversal that should give us all pause. Now, we'll start our conversation with the first question for Gretta. Gretta, can you tell our student listeners when the world started measuring hunger in a systematic way? And by knowing this, we could see how far we have come since recording on a global scale and how far we still need to go in order to eradicate hunger globally.
Thanks, Olga, and hi, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. So that's a good question. And maybe I can start by unpacking what we mean when we talk about hunger. So although it might look like a small word, relatively, it's quite a big and complex issue. Hunger isn't just the feeling of being hungry before lunch. In the development and humanitarian world, it refers to the lack of access to sufficient, safe, nutritious food that allows us all to live in healthy and active lives. Hunger is often measured in terms of what we call food insecurity or malnutrition, which can range from not having enough calories, just not getting enough food on a daily basis, or it could be something like missing essential vitamins and minerals with a kind of more hidden hunger. Now, in terms of when we began measuring hunger systematically, there isn't really a single starting point, but rather a few key milestones, which I can kind of point to. First is the formation of the UN agency Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO. And that was in 1945, just after World War II. So you can imagine the world at the time was in turmoil, and there was kind of the UN formed and kind of coming together. And food and agriculture was kind of one of those key priorities at the time. So it really marked at the beginning of serious global efforts to track food supply and availability, market prices, etc. Then jump forward to maybe the 1970s, and FAO started publishing a report called The State of Food Insecurity in the World, which is called SOFI by short. And that was kind of the first real report that gave global estimates of undernourishment. So undernourishment would be like the percentage of population that isn't getting enough calories on a daily basis. Now, that report was first published in 1970, and it's been published every year since, with the most recent one being published last month. So you have that whole body of evidence built up over decades. Also, like over the years, it's not just talking about calories and measuring calories, but we also look at people's real experience, the social experience of food insecurity and hunger, the social experience of malnutrition. That's also measured. Nutrition indicators that track child stunting, which is when kids have low height for their age, so they're not over time, they're not getting enough the right type of food and nutrition to be able to grow as they should and hit those milestones, or child wasting. So it should be like a very acute, severe form of malnutrition due to maybe emergency or kind of those immediate shocks. So the likes of UNICEF, the World Health Organization, WHO, FAO, they all have a kind of different responsibilities tracking all these different types of food insecurity and malnutrition. So to kind of, it's hard to kind of pinpoint one single place to measure hunger, but what Concern and another NGO from Germany, Welthungerhilfe, did about 20 years ago, we created a global hunger index. So it brought all those kind of things I mentioned earlier, UNICEF with their nutrition data, WHO with their mortality data, and FAO with undernourishment. And we pulled that data together into one index and gave every country a score from 0 to 100. And then that global hunger index, we've been publishing that every year for the last 20 years. And we can kind of see countries that are kind of progressing ahead, but might get knocked back due to a shock, countries that are just lagging behind, etc. So it's a really interesting report. And things like this, these reports, they're really useful and really important because what gets measured gets noticed. Without the data, hunger can remain invisible and in the shadows. But when we can show, for example, how many people or how many children are stunted, it becomes much harder for us to ignore, especially for governments and the international community to ignore. So tracking hunger over time allows us to see progress, the positives, but also to kind of raise the alarm when we're falling behind or if there's emergencies that need to be addressed. And I think it helps hold us all accountable to that kind of ultimate goal of ending hunger.
That's some very powerful points that you made there, Gretta. Thank you so much for sharing. And my next question is for you again. Can you tell our student listeners what would be the biggest challenges to achieving zero hunger globally? What are those roadblocks?
Oh my goodness. Biggest challenge. It's a big, challenging question. We often talk about three things that are really, really driving hunger, global hunger, and just kind of creating these barriers to progress. There's conflict, there's climate change, and there's slow recovery from things like COVID or economic shocks and instability. There's those kind of three things, but also these are layered with just persistent inequality and weak governance. So I can talk through those kind of 3-4 things. First, conflict remains the single biggest driver of hunger. Conflict doesn't just cause immediate hardship. It destroys crops. It disrupts the markets. It forces families to leave their land and not plant for the next season and become displaced. And it makes it very, very hard as well for humanitarian aid to reach people that are then displaced. Hunger linked to conflict has almost doubled between 2018 and 2023. So like in a 5-year kind of span, hunger linked to conflict has doubled. And about 3/4 of the world's people that are facing acute food insecurity, they're living in fragile and conflict-affected contexts. So that just shows how concentrated the acute hunger crisis is in places where violence and instability persists. So there's really direct correlation there. Second thing is climate change. It's really hitting already fragile food systems. We're seeing more frequent droughts, floods, storms. And these shocks fall hardest on smallholder farmers who rely on predictable weather patterns to grow food. Traditional and indigenous kind of food systems and agricultural systems that are very much in tune with the local environment and ecosystem, they're all being now thrown out of whack. And climate stresses, they magnify existing inequalities and make hunger more widespread. Then the third, I suppose, the progress towards zero hunger, it slowed dramatically, and it kind of started from 2016. There's huge progress, and it was a really positive story up to around 2016, and things started just kind of getting really slow, and the trends started to slow down. And then COVID hit in 2019. So things really started taking a bit of a turn there. Adding to that, you'd food and fuel prices increasing, and we just weren't moving fast enough to kind of recover that progress that was being made. So like last year in the Global Hunger Index, there was kind of a standout stat that was given, and it was at the current pace, the zero hunger milestone won't be reached until around 2160, which is more than 130 years from now. So it's the numbers can be quite mind-boggling, but it just shows that there was such fantastic progress up to 2016, and then we just kind of lost the momentum. And I suppose just finally touching on the inequality and weak governance, hunger isn't just about food shortage. And I think Adam will attest to this when he speaks about his experience. There is enough food in the world. In fact, we're actually wasting quite a lot of it. We produce enough calories for everybody. It's about whether people have fair access to affordable, nutritious food, decent livelihoods, and resilient systems that can withhold shocks. So I suppose the biggest barriers to ending hunger, they're not just technical. We have the solutions. There's political, social, and systematic kind of challenges that we need to address.
Yeah. So it's a very wide approach that needs to be taken to eradicate hunger globally, and bring about dramatic change in the numbers we're seeing. Thank you, Gretta, for that. There was a little bit of hope there. There was also a lot of hardship that you described in what is going on with the global trends. And Adam, my next question would be for you. So, as you are a guest panelist with the hands-on experience in combating food waste and food insecurities here at home, can you tell us more about what were your drivers in creating the Student Pantry, and how did you come to the idea?
Yeah. Well, first off, thanks for having me. Really appreciate being here. Honestly, it's kind of the best part of the story, and like bit of the embarrassing part of the story is like a big boy trying to be himself in the world. Is the idea for the Student Pantry came from being inspired by my mum. As all good ideas do come from, is having an amazing mom. So she started a very similar model of redistributing surplus food in our local community at home in Donegal. And after taking part in that and getting to work in it on a voluntary basis for a few years, when I moved to Galway for college, I realized, oh my, there must be so much more great food going to waste here in a big city than in rural Donegal. So the plan started there, and I called my mum. I explained my thinking and asked her permission to adapt her work in my own way in Galway, because at the end of the day, without her permission, I wasn't going anywhere. This is where I started, taking food that would be wasted and giving it straight to students for free. The driving force was really sustainability and equality. Nowadays, if you want to live a sustainable lifestyle, you have to pay a high price. So this was to help remove that barrier, because a lot of young people are really passionate. The young people are the most passionate about sustainability and living a sustainable lifestyle, but with a group who can't afford to.
So true. And thank you so much for sharing that very inspiring story. And just before the podcast started, you shared with me how your mum is your inspiration for a lot of things, which is great to see. And Adam, what our next question would be also for you. What would you say your biggest hurdles were in setting up the Student Pantry, and how was it received in your local community? Because I can imagine it was a grand idea and you had to start it from somewhere. How did you go about it?
I'll start with the reception. So the reception has always been amazing from students, lecturers, and the wider community as well. Literally straight from the get-go. But with regards to hurdles, they've been endless. Everything from my own work-life balance, focusing on my degree, to the biggest one of all, like getting actual support from university. At first, absolutely nobody believed in me or the Student Pantry. They thought I was just full of hot air, and countless times I was told things like this have been tried, they never work, so this won't be any different. This left me with no other option but than to just fire ahead. Approved or not, this is an initiative I believed in. This meant I was initially running it out of a single chest freezer in a bike shed in my student accommodation, which definitely wasn't kosher. But after the ball got rolling, it just kept rolling. And it took a few years, but thanks to people literally just giving me a chance along the way and slowly buying in a little bit more and more, we've now got to the stage where we have a full commercial grade kitchen, kitchen, and it's like a shop as well. Like, so it's got to the point where it's gone from a bike shed to being proper and official. And it's just endless hurdles like that.
Brilliant. It's interesting to see how you started off and how you, in the end, proved all those naysayers wrong. And Gretta, if my next question would be for you, if we have been measuring hunger for decades and world leaders keep making promises, why do so many people still go hungry around the world? And I know that Adam touched on the idea of people thinking he was full of hot air when he started the initiative. And then you also mentioned how we produce more than enough food as is. But why so many people still go hungry today?
It's a bit of a puzzle to try and put the pieces together and get a clear picture. Like if we have, like you've been saying, we've been measuring hunger for decades. World leaders, governments, presidents, prime ministers, they keep making commitments. So why does hunger still persist? Is it all talk? And it's a complex issue. Like I talked about, conflict, climate change, slow economic recovery post-COVID, inequality, weak governance. Like there's one massive ball of thread and it's all just knotted in together. But I think the real kind of at the crux of this is hunger persists while we know of many, many, many solutions. And it will take many solutions layered on top of each other and phased to kind of really address this, from building climate resilient food systems to investing in smallholder farmers, scaling up nutrition programs, promoting peace building initiatives. And we're not seeing we have solutions for all of these things, but the level of investment and political commitment needed to deliver in these at scale and consistently over decades, not just short-term pilot projects in one or two provinces. We're just not getting that level of scale and long-term commitment. So people still go hungry not because we lack the tools, but because the global and national level leadership just hasn't been consistent enough and to put resources and sustained commitment behind ending hunger. At the same time, we shouldn't lose hope. Like I was saying before, there has been progress. There's some great examples. Bangladesh, Peru, Nepal, Mozambique, really, really like positive stories of change. Like everywhere, still challenges and still mountains to climb. But like from my own experience working in Bangladesh, like it's incredible to hear the stories and the experience from people there. Over the past few decades, the country dramatically reduced hunger and child malnutrition. And this happened because of combination and that layering of interventions, like I mentioned. So there's massive investments in agriculture, especially rice production and irrigation, strong public health and nutrition programs that really reached out to mothers and children, huge women's empowerment, like a lot of the garment sector, so a lot of the clothes that are going to export markets like to Ireland. There's huge employment and livelihood opportunities there for women on that. And then social safety nets to support kind of the poorest households. So yeah, it wasn't one single solution, but it came from consistent multi-sector efforts with the government, NGOs, international partners kind of coming together and working on the issue. So it shows that like countries like that and others, progress is absolutely possible with the right investments and that consistent political commitment over time. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. And Gretta, what would be, in your opinion, the nature of the phrase hot air in the context of the motion we're discussing and we're chatting about today?
I think we're to me, what comes to mind is words without real nice words, without the recognition of the root causes of the problem, and then backed up with effective action. Like speeches and commitments and promises, they're important, very important. You need that. And they sound great and they can be very uplifting and motivating and kind of help pull people together and kind of give a common goal and a common vision. But without really kind of understanding and recognizing the root causes and then backing it with financing and resourcing it, they kind of fall short then. But I'd go back to say that like we have plenty of evidence of what works to reduce hunger, and it is just that making sure there's investments in it. So for me, hot air, it's the gap between the words, the real barriers, and the action. So if we could try and bring them together more, the air would be less hot. It'll cool down the temperature a bit.
Provide more action. So the other thing I wanted to ask you as well, Gretta, is if we were talking about what is promised versus what is delivered to combat global hunger, are there currently any effective means of holding countries and various actors accountable? For example, do countries such as Ireland face repercussions for missing targets? Is there any punishment for failing to meet certain criteria?
No, there isn't. Right now, there's some mechanisms for monitoring and reporting, but very few effective ways of holding countries like to account if they fall short. So I think the Sustainable Development Goals, which I think most of the listeners will be familiar with, we have the Sustainable Development Goals. Countries report on their progress towards their targets. For hunger, you have Zero Hunger, you have SDG 2. But like it's a voluntary reporting. It's like if you miss your target, there isn't like a fine or there isn't like a repercussion. But I think what these reports help us do is see the gap between the words and the action. And I think it's the accountability that does exist tends to come then through public pressure and civil society advocacy and peer comparison. So looking at your next door neighbor, have you done better or worse than them? So I think when countries see their progress ranked and highlighted in global reports, which then gets picked up by media and the civil society, it can put pressure on governments to act because no one wants to be seen to be falling behind. So at the moment, what we have is more soft accountability than like hard enforcement, which to an extent it's effective. But I think more formalized, systematic accountability measures would definitely be helpful.
Indeed. Thank you so much for that, Gretta. It's interesting to see the kind of gap between promises or pledges and real live action. Adam, as your amazing initiative has made such a real difference to tackling hunger and poverty locally, what can international stakeholders learn from successful local initiatives such as the Student Pantry that you founded?
So for me, my biggest hope for this is that it inspires action. I've spent most of my life taking part in protests and like asking for action. But I found there's a massive leap from protesting to action. Protesting is vital, but it's important to know when you have to take the steps and move to acting on your own. It's a scary step, but a necessary one. I know Greta has touched on it loads throughout her conversation, and I couldn't agree more with everything she's saying. It's really easy to get up on stage and say you're going to do something and talk about how amazing the work you're going to do is and say the impact you're going to have. But that's so different to actually having an impact and doing what you're saying you're going to do. I really want people to just take the notion that anyone can make a difference. You just need to try, think outside the box, and not be afraid to fail. This so could have easily failed. There's so many times when it should have failed. Whether I have stories of me just not having a driving license and having to get who is now my girlfriend, but at the time was just my lab partner, to do all the driving for us. Or I was sick and in hospital and other friends having to do it totally on their own with no experience. Wow. So these are the types of things that do fail. And it is about having action. And I think people find it very easy to talk about what they want to do and not actually do it. On a much larger scale, we need to learn that all this apparent waste isn't actually waste at all. Somebody has just decided it is now waste. In Ireland, in 2023, we wasted nearly 1 million tons of food. That's shocking. And who at what point in the supply chain is deciding that food now became waste? In the pantry I've set up in Galway, last year we redistributed nearly €500,000 worth of food alone to students for completely free. It cost us practically nothing to do. But if we, in a small city, like Galway is a tiny city, have done nearly €500,000 worth of food to such a small population of students, why isn't this happening everywhere? There's so much food going to waste. If we're talking about nearly 1 million tons worth of food, that 1 million ton has a much bigger price tag on it. And it's just not ethical.
Wow. And it also showcases how one person with big plans and initiatives can bring about such massive change in their local community like yourself did, and how this is actually doable.
Yeah, and that it is, like, I'm not a genius. My grades show I should have been done my bachelor's a long time ago. I'm nothing special. So these big politicians who are in big, powerful positions, you've got to a place where your voice has so much more power. It is easy for someone in a better position than me, I presume, to have a much bigger impact. So if I've had such a big impact on such a small scale, as such a small little ant, I think anyone can take from that no matter how small you feel, you can still make a change.
Or you just need more of a global platform to voice all of these actions and showcase practical changes. Yeah. Adam, when you're looking ahead, where do you see the future for the Student Pantry, and what are your hopes and plans for scaling and sustaining the successful initiative going forward?
This is the kind of question I love, even though I feel it often might make me feel or sound a little bit like a giddy kind of childish guy. But the way I see this is I see a student pantry in every university in Ireland. I know quite a few universities have taken inspiration from what I've done in Galway, but I'd love every university in Ireland to do that. And ideally the world. Obviously saying the world is a big thing, but the operational costs are practically zero. The food is going to waste. And universities are places for people to become educated, to come together, to better the world. You don't go to university to do bad. You go there to better yourself and hopefully spread that out. So I feel like there's no better breeding ground for something like this than an institution like a university.
Absolutely. And I do hope that all these plans and dreams come to fruition slowly but surely, and that you have trusted people in place to kind of help you make that happen and make it a reality. My last question to you, Adam, based on your experience of taking that meaningful action that has benefited so many in your community, is there any message you would like to convey to world leaders in order to bring about real systematic change? As you've mentioned, that there are people with so much more power that can actually make things happen. So what would your message be to those people to bring about systematic change in our global food system and truly realize our commitment to zero hunger globally?
So not to be cheeky and steal your words and kind of take a bit of inspiration from Greta, but it's the world leaders, in my opinion, who are full of hot air. just to totally steal from you guys. You have the power. The power is in your hands. You can make the rules. We have to play by your rules. The people can actually make a dream like this come true, where no good food goes to waste. But that's not me. I can only help some food from not going to waste. It's you. It's the people with the power, the world leaders. You can actually make a massive change, or make a small change that lets us make a massive change. We can't do much unless you help pave the road for us a little bit of the way. But
so you see it as an interconnected relationship there
Yeah,
between the civic duties
Yeah.
and then world
Yeah.
leaders.
I think nothing worth happening doesn't happen without people from multiple different sectors working together. Every real meaningful change has always come from people working together, whether it's from different backgrounds, different countries. We are one planet, and unless we start looking at it like that, it's never going to change. Obviously, Ireland has binned a lot more food than we need to feed our homeless or our starving people. But globally, we have more than enough calories. Greta touched on it as well. Like, we are producing as a planet so much more than what is necessary. But there is countries, and Greta, I'm going to just keep referencing Greta here, but the places being affected by global warming and that are having their agricultural systems ruined because of global warming, they're not the ones. They're the ones that are suffering, and we're the ones producing that CO2. We're the ones changing the environment for them, and they're having to suffer it. But then we're also wasting the food when we get excess. So it is, I think we as a people need to realize that we are one people and we are one planet, and we have one food supply chain, and it could be a whole lot more efficient.
Thank you so much for that. And Greta, my next question would be for you. So from listening to Adam's experience with the food pantry, are there similar examples that you can think of from some of the countries that Concern works in?
Firstly, I'm just so blown away by some of the figures from Adam, and just the get up and go approach to it. Like €500,000 worth of food saved in such a small geographic area. Like, a huge project for you guys to take on as students, but like the value of that food and just visualizing it being dumped into a tip, it's so incredible and so, I think, inspiring. And that's a kind of local to global action. I think you hit the nail on the head there. Like, we can all kind of do something within our own kind of zone of influence. So yeah, I think the meaningful change comes from us all working together. It really, really resonates with ourselves and Concern. And I was thinking about this and going through some of our country programs and looking at some of the profiles we have. And one project I always kind of go back to is from Nairobi in Kenya, and it touches on that, like, all different people coming together to kind of tackle a problem. And in Nairobi, in the urban slums, like, at the time there was high levels of malnutrition amongst children. Like, about 19% of children in the communities we worked in were stunted, so they'd be low height for their age. So like, and parents were busy working these kind of informal labor jobs. So time to cook and be healthy, affordable, nutritious food it's such a challenge in these communities. So Concern, together with the Ministry of Health, the Nairobi County government, and a local company, private sector company called Euro Ingredients, they all came together with local communities, and they did a kind of brainstorming exercise around how they could tackle the solution, this problem, with like a really creative solution. So they came up with using vitamin A rich sweet potatoes, so that kind of orange flesh sweet potatoes, and to use that ingredient to make tasty and affordable chapatis. So chapatis looks kind of like a pancake. So they trained up local vendors, provided them with like hygienic kind of food carts, because food hygiene is a big challenge as well in this context. trained up over 100 vendors, linked them up with local farmers that were producing sweet potatoes. And then they also trained up community health volunteers. So the community health volunteers went out and they did all these awareness sessions about nutrition, safe food, hygiene, etc. And it created a spark and a demand for a new product. But then they're ready then with the food vendors to provide the supply of this new product. So the supply and demand was all kind of coming together at once within the local community. And so then, like, at the family level, you have this new kind of product on the market that's ready-made, it's affordable, it's nutritious. So it's really impressive. Between 2020 and 2023, this, along with other different interventions, you had the child malnutrition rates, they dropped to about 18.9%. So it was really, really positive. And like 10,000 farmers benefited. They had somewhere to sell their produce at a good price as well. And then the project also influenced it. And this goes back to Adam's point of, like, people who have the power to make change and make the rules. Like, this project then went to local authorities and they started influencing the new Nairobi Food Safety and Food Fortification Bill. So then the rules changed because we went to them and said, hey, here's a good example. You need to change the rules. And so then that long-term kind of ripple effect then kind of takes hold. So yeah, it's a really cool project. It was very small, but had this kind of big ripple effect.
Massive impact.
And yeah, it was a nice kind of private sector, local community initiative.
Brilliant. That's wonderful to hear, such positive outcome from initiatives of this kind. And based on the gaps that you have identified from the pledges, the promises made, all that talk, all the hot air, and then reaching those targets, what action or policy implementation would you like to see from world leaders in the next 5 years to ensure much needed progress towards the zero hunger goal?
It's quite an urgent question, I think. It's like, I really feel that the clock is ticking. And I think the next 5 years will determine not only how close to the target we will get, maybe we won't reach it, but how close are we going to get to it? But then what next? Because if the commitment kind of wanes off now, post 2030, is it going to be picked back up again? It's just going to be so much harder. So it really is, the clock is ticking between now and 2030. I think one of the biggest priorities is for world leaders to match their promises and these commitments and with investment. In the food security and nutrition space, there's a serious lack of financing. We know what works: supporting smallholder farmers, nutrition programs, empowering women-led initiatives, building food systems, resilience to climate shocks, etc. We know what works, but they're not properly funded and they're not implemented at scale. We have to move beyond the small pilot, short-term projects that have to get to scale. Second thing is stronger action on conflict and fragility. Like I was saying before, 3/4 of people facing acute hunger live in conflict-affected contexts. So without peace building and political solutions, humanitarian aid alone will not solve hunger. It's just a band-aid. There needs to be a longer-term solution. Third, leaders, they need to take bold steps on climate and food systems. The two are married in together. Food systems can be both a contributor to climate change and global emissions, but it also can mitigate if we adopt the right type of agricultural and food systems approaches. It can actually help reduce emissions. And finally, there needs to be a big step change in accountability, which I think we talked at length today on. With pledges and commitments, they're really important. They're not enough. Yeah. So yeah, maybe that if we did all that stuff, we'd be in a much better place.
And also, I suppose, to fast track it in a way. not to take over 100 years to get to the goal. And thank you so much to you, Gretta, and to you, Adam, for all the insight and knowledge shared with all of us today. After we chatted about the motion Global Commitments to Ending World Hunger are a load of hot air. Adam, I would like to ask you to offer one proposing or supporting argument as a guide to the students who will be proposing the motion. What would your one tip be to them to start off?
My one tip would be to look at it from two ways. Of when I first read Global Commitments to Ending World Hunger are a load of hot air, I was actually angry because I was like, no, they are not. And I felt personally attacked. But I think you have to be honest and you have to look at it from both sides of, yeah, it does feel like global commitments to ending world hunger are just a load of hot air. But then you talk to Greta, and then hopefully you talk to me, and you might think, damn, global commitments to ending world hunger are not a lot of hot air. They're a steam train rolling in a positive direction. But it's just a slow process. And you got to listen to the right voices, because some voices are full of hot air and some voices are not. And I like to think mine isn't. And I know for a fact Greta's isn't. So that would be my one tip.
Thank you
Listen
so
to both
much.
sides.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for
I'm sure
having me.
the students proposing the motion will be very delighted to kind of get to start with their research, and we'll start looking at those positive approaches that have been mentioned by Greta and by yourself, and look at all the positive changes that have been brought about by amazing initiatives. Greta, what would your one tip for the students who will be opposing or disagreeing with the motion, global commitments to ending world hunger are a load of hot air?
My tip would be, don't just focus on the broken promises, because that's the easy way out. There are plenty of broken promises, but that's not the full story. And I love Adam's line, we have to listen to the right voices. So find the champions, find the solutions, highlight the real progress that's made, be it at a national level or with national kind of champions and leaders, or if it's local farmers or cooperative groups or food vendors or the food pantry down in University of Galway. And like I'll give an example from Bangladesh and Kenya. There's so many more. And they're not hot air. That's real, genuine commitment and hard work. And they can deliver results when backed by the proper resources and partnerships and political will. So I'd say your strongest argument is to say that the problem isn't that the commitments are meaningless, it's that they need to be taken seriously and acted on. And when they are, change does happen, and we can see it happening. We have some great examples.
Thank you so much for that. I'm sure the opposing students will be delighted to get a little guide as to where to start with their research. So, dear Adam and Greta, and dear listeners, this marks the end of the third podcast installment of the debating season 2025-2026. I am sure that each of you will take something very valuable as a guide on your debating journey from our very knowledgeable guests, Gretta Fitzgerald and Adam Mullins. I would also like to thank you all for the time offered and all the insights into the motion at hand, and I would like to wish you every success on your quest to end world hunger or to bring about a dramatic change. To you, Adam, the very best of luck with your initiative, and hopefully it goes from local to global in the years to come. And to you, Greta, to continue with the career in the humanitarian sector where your heart lies, and to continue with that passion to bring about change.
Thanks so much, guys, and goodbye.
Thanks, Olga. Thanks, Adam. It's been great chatting.
Thank you all for listening, and we hope you tune in to hear this and the next episodes at www.concern.net or on the Concern Worldwide YouTube channel, where you can scroll to the bottom of our YouTube channel, click on the Concern Resources hub, click on playlists there, and then click on the post-primary resources. This is where our Debating Development podcast series can be found. You can also find the Debating Development podcast series on Spotify by typing in Concern Worldwide Debating Development Podcasts. We would also like to thank Irish Aid for all the amazing support offered to the Concern Schools programme. Dear debating students, remember to use Concern's research links for the motions. These are available to download on our website or contact us via email. Email us at debates@concern.net, and please remember to CC your debates mentors in any communication to our team. You can also follow us on social media. On Twitter, we are @ConcernDebates. On Instagram, we are @ConcernActive. And on TikTok, we are @ConcernWorldwide. To close the podcast, I would like to quote one of our founders, Father Angus Finucane: do as much as you can, as well as you can, for as many as you can, for as long as you can. Thank you so much, and goodbye.